Today, Hilary Leon is an artist, is going to tell about Synch.Live, an experience where that is nominated for the human machine interaction, and she can tell us everything about this innovative experience.
Thank you so much. I think there must be, there we go. Wow, it's a bright light. I am so thrilled to be here. So I want to thank you all for coming. I'm Hilary Leon, and although it says that Synch.Live was created and directed by me, which is true, this project has been, I'm moving and getting some sound over there, so I'll try not to go there, is really a love project that has been informed and shaped by many, many hands and hearts and brains. And I'm very grateful to my team, my international team, for getting us to this place. I want to start with this. And for those of you who've played the game, it might sound familiar. But how many of you have seen a flock of birds flying in kind of perfect coordination? And they're turning on a dime as if they are a single organism flying as one. Now, I've always been mesmerized by flocks and wondered, I don't know if you've ever wondered, like, how do they do this? Well, it turns out that flocking is a collective behavior that birds do by instinct. And they're following simple rules. And the rules are fly toward the center of the flock, don't collide, and match your speed and direction only with your nearest neighbors. So you could have 10,000 birds in the sky, and each one is only paying attention to 5 to 7 birds around them, which is kind of amazing. So the flock stopped. It should be looped, but that's okay. Anyway, let me stop this now if I can. So flocking is a phenomenon that scientists call emergence. And emergence is literally when individual parts of a system interact, self-organize, and become something greater than the sum of their parts. Emergence is a phenomenon that you see pretty much in every system at every scale, right? Fish and birds and ants, you see them in ecosystems. It's the formation of stars and galaxies. And one of my favorite, it is actually the dominant explanation for cognition, that our brains, our neurons in our brains are emergent, and that the more emergent your brain, sort of, I guess the deeper your thoughts, perhaps. I'm not sure the scientists would agree with that. So I looked up at the sky and I said, wow, nature cooperates in this astonishing way. What about humans? You know, not so much these days in my experience. You know, we're polarized, we're divided, we're less and less able to communicate with each other, and sort of less and less tolerant of different ways of thinking and different views. And so I came to this project really as a human, you know, with this urge to have more human connection. And I thought that, you know, if flocks of birds, you know, could do it, maybe that's a model for human cooperation. So I had this incredible opportunity to work with a team of UK-based neuroscientists. And they were studying actually consciousness and emergence in the brain. And I engaged them, and this has been going on since 2020 and 2020, to see if we could operationalize emergence into a game. And the scientists were interested because they had just published this algorithm that measured causal emergence. And of course, I've read this paper, I don't know, probably 17 times. And if you want to read it, it's on the website, but it's pretty complicated. But they have come up with a mathematical formula to measure it. And so we said, hey, do you think we could use that to measure human emergence? And they're like, why not? So it had never been done before. So they were pretty excited because they're mathematicians and physicists, and they're thinking about those things, and they don't often get the opportunity to apply this kind of rigorous science to like real-world human conditions and to human social organization. So that's exactly what we set out to do. Now, it turns out that creating the conditions for human emergence was far more technologically and scientifically challenging than we had thought. So it took us a couple of years. Obviously, it was 2020. We were in the pandemic. I worked with these scientists very closely for 2 years. I never met them. It was all over Zoom. And we couldn't, once we actually we developed the concept and then developed a prototype and had an idea that we wanted to test, we couldn't test it because nobody could gather. So as soon as the world started opening up, we had our first public pilot, which was in 2022 in the UK. And we ran the game with 300 people. And the scientists designed a formal science experiment. They got, ethics approval and so forth. And we did psychometric data collection before and after. And then we did an analysis of, I'm saying we, but it's really the scientists who did this. I was supportive and excited. And out of this, we actually have written a paper, which is pretty exciting. Oops. So this is what it looks like, for those of you who haven't played yet. All right. So now I want to break it down a little bit. So at this stage, at this scale, we can play the game with up to 20 people. So it's 10 to 20 people in the space we have here. It's pretty small, and we're doing a maximum of 10. Although we have many different game narratives, which if you've played the game, the basic rules are the same. And that's no talking, no touching, keep moving. Now you might say, why no talking? Well, when I set out to sort of solve the human cooperation problem, I actually thought it was a language problem. And I thought that language was broken because I couldn't have a conversation with anybody anymore. And it turns out my aha moment was that language is actually not broken, but it's merely insufficient for the complexity of our moment. And that we need our language, right? And we need all of our languages. It's been a beautiful international group here. But we need an and, right? We need language, and we need other ways to communicate. And I thought that if we could disable our default system for communication, maybe we could enable a more pre-linguistic instinct to cooperate, right? Humans are a social species, and cooperation is our secret sauce, right? So I thought maybe if we created a situation in which people who maybe had very different views about the world could come together, right? That we could, in a sense, hack the amygdala. You could rewire, right? Like when you see somebody that your body says you don't like them because that's how you've been conditioned. Like in Synch.Live, they're your team. And our brains are able to do that. They're mutable. So that was the thinking behind it. So no talking. You can't see or control your hat lights, right? So you have no individual control, and the only way you can succeed in Synch.Live is by succeeding together. So what's our technology? So first I want to say one of the exciting pieces of this is that we really are the first to quantify flocking behavior in human groups with a feedback mechanism, right? So this is very new technology. It's probably why it's been such a high mountain to climb. When we first did it in the UK, we used computer vision for position tracking. I got back to New York, and I was like, there was no way I could find a 20-foot ceiling. It was just impossible. Space was so difficult. So we actually redeveloped the technology using ultra-wideband signal, which is what we're using here. The position tracking is just something we need. It's not essential in the sense that we may go to something else next as we evolve and develop this project. But the key part is this algorithm that the scientists develop. And this algorithm, okay, so emergence has been around since Aristotle, just to be clear. It is not a new idea, but what is new in science is the ability to measure it. And so we took something like literally, they published it in June, and in July, we were integrating their algorithm. And the other really, really cool part of this project for me is that all of the original scientists are still on board. So for whatever reason, there's something here that has sustained the imagination and interest of these incredibly brilliant minds. And I'm so honored actually to have them at the table. Like every time we'd have a Zoom call, I'd kind of pinch myself and say, this is amazing. I can't believe that we're doing this. But it also meant when we were developing it initially, I had the authors of the algorithm like at the table helping us calibrate it and make it work. So that's actually their algorithm thing, and the ultra wideband. But this is all something that's in process. I mean, I think our future, one of the things we want to do is just make it more lightweight. Right now, it's pretty infrastructure heavy. It was a big lift to come to Berlin. We're so excited to be here. So we want to be able to, some future moment where we show up with our little kit, and there you have it. I think it'll make this a much more portable experience. So the science. So as I said, we collected data at the beginning. The person that came on board, who was the first software engineer to help us prototype the hardware and software, was entering a PhD program in complexity science. At the end of this, just a month ago, she got her PhD. And so that was pretty exciting. And Synch.Live is really the focus of it. So we had not only like an amazing software engineer, but we had somebody so deeply invested in the science and the set of ideas we were exploring. So what did we find out? We found out that players in winning groups felt more connected to one another after they played the game, right? Which is cool. So Synch.Live makes you feel more connected. We found that, and this was kind of the consciousness piece, we were curious about if people were aware of the strategies they used, right? So if you have played the game, you might remember your experience. If you haven't yet, it's sort of like, are you thinking about, I'm following this person, I'm not following this person, whatever your strategy is, are you aware of it, right? Is there a conscious awareness? What we found, which was so interesting, is that people that were aware of the strategies they used were more likely to be in winning groups. And so that suggested to us that individual agency, individual action has a role to play in collective action, right? I think people are afraid of the collective because they think that it's authoritarian, we're all gonna sort of, or fascistic or whatever. But I think what we're finding here is that like you're important as an individual and in order for the collective to work. So both parts are important, and we want to do more research in that. The other kind of cool thing is after the game, we took 10-second clips of gameplay, and one of the scientists did a study to see if emergent patterns, first of all, if the subjects could figure out which patterns were emergent, and they could, and second, were they more beautiful? And so I can say tonight very proudly that emergent patterns are more subjectively more beautiful, which is kind of also interesting in another area for future research. So what are we doing with it? Part of my challenge over the last 5 years or 6 years has just been that there's so many fun things that we could do with Synch.Live, right? So this is just some of them that I list up here. It's a game, it's an experience, it's social art. I think as an artist, I don't know, do you guys know what awe is, right? Awe is this emotion that you feel when you're in the presence of something that you can't explain with your current knowledge. So my fantasy for Synch.Live is that we get 1,000 people on a field, and in 10 or 12 minutes, the entire field is able to synchronize their lights without talking. I mean, that would be awesome, right? So it's like this magical experience of like something happening that you can't explain. And for those of you who've played, I always say at the end, so what did, one of the things that people say to me, I say, so what do you think? And they say, I don't know how we did it, right? And it's okay not to know how, because I think Synch.Live is also about like being okay with not knowing and finding some joy and delight and pleasure in that. So we're interested in sort of applying it to team building. A lot of people ask us if we can come and do team building experiences, as icebreakers, or, I mean, one of the things that I can see it as is just any kind of priming activity for any other activity, right? So you're going to a concert, or you're going to about to do like some kind of creative brainstorm, or you're, anything that you want to sort of give people an opportunity to sort of meet each other in a very neutral way and do something silly and fun. But I guess you guys all know that because that's what games are about. So community building, wellness is a big piece of this. And of course, there's the science research, and we have a whole science research track in the sense that we have just some new scientists coming in. We're about to do a pilot in Paris at the end of May, if you're in Paris. And so it's more of an experiment than it is an entertainment thing. But we have a young scientist there who wants to use it to study leadership. And then we're going to actually, after we pilot in Paris, we're taking it to Mallorca at the end of June for a complexity conference. So those are not bad places to have to go, right? And the other piece are the analytics. So this is something that, because this was designed as a science experiment, it was, we log all of the data, and we have all of this kind of treasure trove of motion data. It's all anonymized, so it's not tracked to any individual. And we're sort of just looking at, like, what can we learn about collective human behavior, right? What can we learn about the ways in which people move together and work together and learn together? One of the things that you can do with Synch.Live is it really, like one of the groups was talking about being uncomfortable, there's discomfort. So how do you overcome discomfort? There's resilience, there's adaptability, there's situational awareness. There's all kinds of wonderful skills that you can gain from playing this game without having to try too hard, right? It's just kind of fun. We also know that, in my experience, some groups are just better than others, right? And there's no reason why except that there's some good vibe. I was talking to a guy a couple of years ago who was in one of these corporations, and he was saying, I've been running teams for 30 years, and some teams to this day, they still get together and have drinks, every 6 months. And some teams never gelled. And there's this magical thing called team chemistry. So there's also a chance that Synch.Live could start to give us some insights about what makes a good team, how people come together and create that magic. So what's next for us? So I mentioned analytics. I think we're super interested in looking at what we can learn from this data about how humans interact, right? So one of the things I'm particularly interested in is looking at individual contribution to collective effort. We talked about the study where people who were more aware of the strategies they used were more likely to be in winning groups, right? So could we understand how individuals contribute in more specific ways? So it would be super cool to know that, we've all been on teams, and there's somebody who's loud and extroverted and gets everybody moving, and then there's a really quiet person, but that person actually plays a really critical role. And so I think if we can understand the different roles people play, maybe there's one person on the team when there's a disruption, like our disruption, I won't name it in case you haven't played it yet, but if there's a disruption and that particular player is very good at bringing the group back together, right? So I think we could find all of the ways that people bring something very special to making a collective successful. And so we're super excited to kind of dive into those analytics. It's related to the science research, although also with the science research, as I said, we have some new scientists coming on board. The fact that at a complexity conference, they want to run an experiment is pretty exciting to us. We have been to several complexity conferences. I love that part of this project. I call myself a citizen scientist. I'm not a scientist. But I think it's pretty cool to have something so rigorous that we can continue to create fun with it, but that there's this science backbone. And that every time we play the game, we can just collect more data that's going to help us understand how to make human groups work better. And we'd love to do some paid experiences, right? It's time. So we're excited to bring this to, let's say, conferences or anybody that has an event or a group and you want to, create a big social experience. So what we're looking for is we want to start doing event activations. We've started this in the US. And part of that process is we want to, like I said, take our tech stack and make it smaller, make this more portable, easier to run. Right now it's very human. It takes a lot of hands. But there's lots of ideas we have about how to get there. It requires money, and so we're looking for some of that too. But more, that's really important, but we're really looking for collaborators, strategic collaborators who can help us take this to new places and help us scale it, help us get to that lower tech stack, and help us make Synch.Live a sort of a global phenomenon. I think it's possible. I think we come to you and say, it's a human connection game, and I think we all need to go back and connect with each other. At least when I look at the world, I try not to read the news, but when I do read the news, I kind of go back to my little self and I say, well, I'm going to wake up today and try to change the world, and I've got something that could do that. So I want to stop and I want to say thank you for listening. And anybody here that, one of the things that also happened is last year we ran like 12 events in New York. As I was kind of play testing and trying to kind of iterate and make this better. And every single time we ran a play test, 4 or 5 more people joined, either as volunteers or interns or paid consultants or whatever. So I invite you all, we're really trying to put something out in the world, and you come from all places and you bring amazing talent and skills. And if you're aligned with our vision and you want to help bring human connection, to the world, please join us. Super available. We're around for the next couple of days, and thank you. So I want to say one more thing before I want just a shout out to my core team in the UK. Without them, I wouldn't be here. To Dan and Pedro and Fernando and Madalena and Andre, to my New York team, to Jay and Claire and Rachel who are here today. To Robert and Wes and Felice and all of the people in New York who, have gotten us to this point. And I hope I can add some more names to that list. So does anybody have any questions? I have no idea what time it is. How are we doing? Oh, not bad. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Congratulations on the game. We played it earlier this afternoon and we had so much fun. Couldn't stop laughing. So thank you so much. It was a very great experience. I was interested in your connections to the scientific fields and more precisely to geography. I happen to be a geographer. And in France, we have this thing called microgeography. I feel like it's super relevant to what you're actually doing with Synch.Live because it's about understanding how people relate and connect together and also with spaces and how spaces shape that, relationships to people, and also how some people have the agency, to impact and kind of build their own scenery of the space to get people to join them. So yeah, it's a very big and interesting field. I felt like it was super relevant to what you're doing. And so the question I had was, in terms of scientists working with you, around you, have you ever considered geography as a field that could be interesting to mix with Synch.Live? And since your experience is not focused on space but really on people, how do you connect to this spatial subject? Because it feels super relevant to me, and I think it was a wonderful experiment to that extent.
Well, sign up. I mean, we don't have a good... I haven't actually thought about geography before. I think it's a fascinating idea, actually. So we should definitely talk. I mean, we are using spatial computing. This is a spatial experience. Right now, one of the things our position data, we're only collecting X and Y data. And we're not connecting Z, which is height. So it would be super interesting to go 3D in that way. And but I don't know, where my brain went also, well, I'll stop there. But I thought that it was super interesting, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
You could look up for some French geographers on microgeography that could be super interesting to your project.
Yeah, let's do it. We're doing a pilot in Paris. You should come, May 31st, at the Brain Institute, the Paris Brain Institute. Hi.
Hello. Uh, I'm Horatio. I'm a musician and also starting to be a dancer. And I was wondering if you have ever tried this with different groups, for example, with dancers, but it can also be with different types of people with sort of a background that maybe has to do with they're interconnected, because I feel like I've tried something along these lines in terms of these fun little game things, but not so analytical,
Yeah.
but just in terms of connecting to each other. And in some
Yeah.
groups it works better when there was that thing that happens also in jams and in creative things where you kind of click with people. What is your experience with that?
Well, it's a great question. I can give you a good source to look at on that. So there's a scientist named Naomi Leonard who did something called flock logic, but it was like 20 years ago with a dance troupe, Susan Marshall dance troupe, and it's super interesting work. So I would love to do it with dancers. One of the complexities of this, and the reason I'm so thrilled to be at Amaze and why festivals are so good for us actually, is that we can run the game with lots of people. When I'm doing a playtest in New York, it's like, oh, unless it's an event where somebody else is bringing the people, it's hard to. So all of these things are things we want to try. I'd love to try it with my guess is that anybody with kinesthetic intelligence, a dancer, even a football player, right, and as an athlete, would do better because or somebody who plays in an orchestra, or somebody who does jazz improv, or does improv, right? Anybody who is already accustomed to being in a group and knows how to read the room and understands how to do nonverbal communication, and is comfortable in their body, right? Those people do very, very well with this. And better, typically. But I also think, just as a learning thing, is people can learn this, right? One of the things that a lot of people told me the last time we were at Indiecade in LA in November, which was super fun, and I had so many people tell me it's just great that adults get to play. Like, there are no opportunities for adults to play, and this is an opportunity to do that. So thank you. Anybody else?
I think we're out of time.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.